Good morning. It is good to see each of you here this beautiful Lord's Day morning. It's good to see each of you here. This morning's lesson, I'd like to just share with you, beginning with the text in Matthew chapter 5. And seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. We have begun a series. This is the third lesson in the series on the Sermon on the Mount. And perhaps that text was of the sermon, the part that you're most familiar with, that we call the Beatitudes. And I want to share with you this morning a lesson, and John and I, we've both been studying, and I think Ross may be even doing one of the lessons from a book by Randy Harris, and it somewhat challenged me in my perspective. I mean, I've grown up in church all my life. I've heard great lessons on the Beatitudes. I've even tried to preach a few lessons on the Beatitudes. But some of the perspectives I've walked away with have been very meaningful to me, and hopefully we can translate those to you in a very meaningful way so that Sermon on the Mount becomes more than just a piece of text in Scripture. It becomes something you want to live out every day. Now, most of you are familiar with this quote, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but what? The rest of it? Yeah, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words never hurt me." I don't believe that. I believe this. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words they hurt forever. I can't help but believe that you've had words that were used against you, whether intentional or unintentional, that hurt you. What was or were the name or names that cut you to the core? Stupid, dumb, fat, skinny, worthless, sorry, idiot, moron. And it goes on and on. What were the words that hurt you? Some of you still carry the pain of those words and those experiences. I don't care if you're someone that someone looks at that you think, oh, you know, this person had everything going for them. You know, they had their pictures in the yearbook on the superlatives. I don't care who you are. There's been a word thrown at you at some point in time that cut you to the core, to your very being. And some of you still experience the pain of those words. I'm going to guess it to say that because of who you are in your culture, you've never been called an onomum. I'm going to guess you've never been called an onomum. No one? I'm pretty sure that you've never been called an onomum. But you've been called something probably close to it. You see, when we begin the Sermon on the Mount, especially when we begin the first part of the Beatitudes, we need to understand those poor in spirit. Jesus is really referring to a concept that these people are really familiar with. The ideal of being an onomum. Now, if you remember the Hebrew culture and what all happened to the children of Israel, remember as the kingdom began to fall, the first the northern kingdom, then the southern kingdom, okay, they were taken into captivity. They were taken and led. You remember Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and remember the finest and best. Remember Esther. and her uncle Mordecai. Remember, all these people, Nehemiah, all these people were taken out of the land of Israel and taken into the land of Babylon. They came in, the invading armies came in, and the invading conquerors took the best and the brightest. They took the pretty girls and the handsome and strong men. They took the people who were mighty. They took the people who were strong. They took the people who were smart. And everyone else who was worthless to them, they left behind. The pitiful, the weak, the sick. Collectively, these people are known as the Anamim. They were just too useless to even bother with taking. They just left them. They were no threat to this mighty empire. They just left them the land because they were useless to them. The Anamim. So when Jesus begins talking about being blessed, and he begins this lead off to people who are poor in spirit, the concept of Anamim, they were very familiar with. In fact, in some respects, they were still living some of this stuff out, because even though he was in the land of Israel, it was not Israel's land. They were being ruled by the Romans. In fact, Jesus, even in the Sermon on the Mount, are going to talk about how they need to relate to the people who are in charge. The culture they're under, the requirements they're under, and how they, as Christ's followers, remember Jesus, it said in the beginning of our reading, he's talking to his disciples, as Christ's followers, what kind of person are you going to be? Some of you know the pain of being called something very similar to Anamim. We need to understand this is the context in which Jesus is beginning to deliver the Beatitudes. This is what he's beginning to talk about. I sort of shared last with you, I believe there's two objectives to the Sermon on the Mount. One is personal identity. Jesus wants us to know what it means to be like him. The second one, ethical decision-making process. So personal identity, what are the qualities and traits of a good Christ follower? And what does it take to become fully recognized as such? So what do I need to have in my life that people recognize I'm a follower of Jesus? What characteristics, traits, and things do I need to have people instantly recognize me as such? And the second, the ethical decision-making process. What are the guiding principles that shape Christ-like relationships? And how do I apply those principles in real-life situations? So as we move to the Beatitudes today into the rest of the text, a lot of the rest of the text on the Mount is about ethical decision-making processes. How are you going to live as Christ in this world that you're in? How are you going to live with your neighbor? How are you going to live with your enemy? How are you going to live under opposing forces? But the goal of this decision-making process is not to make you think less of yourselves. That's not what Jesus is trying to tell us in this. It's to think of ourselves less. It's not to think that you're worthless or Anamim. That's not what Jesus is saying. What Jesus is saying, I want you to think of yourself less and others more. That's a challenge we have in living out Christ in this world, isn't it? To think of ourselves less and others more. Now, here's where I maybe owe an apology to some of you who've heard me preach the Sermon on the Mount before in the Beatitudes. I treated it probably not fairly with the text, because I treat the Beatitudes as if they're a bunch of commands. You be poor in spirit. You be merciful. You be righteous. They're not meant as a bunch of commands. It's not you strive to be this and then you get blessed. It's not the context. That's not how the text is meant to be read. That's not what they heard. When you think the word blessed, it's from the word, the connotation is happy. Happiness. You are blessed. It's not blessings are to come when you get this. It's when you are this, you are blessed. Jesus is talking to people who knew what it was to be broken. He's talking to people who knew what it was to experience the bottom part of living. When we get toward the end, he begins talking about them. Stop worrying about your food and your clothes. It's going to be there. God's going to take care of you. He's not talking to affluent people, but he wants them to understand something that's critically important as a follower of Jesus, that you are blessed. He doesn't begin with a list of rules to say, do this, then you get blessed. Sometimes how we treat the text, it's not fair to the text. Jesus is talking to people who knew what Anamim meant. They had the names. the derision cast upon them simply by being the people of God. We have a modern term that is used to describe what Jewish people experience today, and it's anti-Semitism. For simply being Jewish, people hate them. That's all it takes. You're a Jew, I hate you. That's all it takes. They could be the best moral person in the world. They could do great mitzvahs, great good deeds in the name of God. But they're still hated simply because of who they are. And it was no different then than it is today. They knew what anima meant. They knew the context of what it meant when he opened his mouth and says, "Blessed be the poor in spirit." And they said, that's us. We have nothing. We are broken people. We are, in the vernacular day, losers. And that's where Jesus begins the teaching. Now, to be fair, we're going to talk about each one of these briefly, but I used a modern translation, the Message, because it puts it in the English I think most of us are more familiar with in a language. But in Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit. I love this language. You are blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there's more of God and His rule. Have you ever been so broken you felt like you were at the end of your rope? And Jesus says, when you're in that moment, guess what? You're blessed. Because you are so broken and God is so big. There's less of you and more of God. This isn't a prescription to go out and get broken, by the way. This is a statement that when you feel that way, guess what? You're blessed. It's not about you anymore, is it? It's about God. It's not your own strength in which you rely. It's God's strength. Now, I know I'm belaboring this point, but I want you to understand, He's not saying you will be blessed. This is a future. He says you are blessed when this happens. This is our experience. Every one of the Beatitudes is speaking to the fact that you are blessed when you find yourself in this condition. It's not aspiration to make yourself broken, but when you are, understand that you are blessed. You honor them out there. You are blessed people because it's more about God and less about you. Matthew chapter 5, verse 4, the idea of blessed are those who mourn. I love this. You are blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can be embraced by the one most dear to you. Some of you, and I sat with you in those moments, you've lost loved ones, you've lost husbands and wives and children and family members and siblings, and you've lost the one who was most dear to you, and you are so broken and you are so mourned. But Jesus is saying, when you find yourself that broken, guess what? God is so close to you. He's embracing you. In losing that who matters most, you find God who matters most. God is near you in your brokenness. We see this powerfully in the life of Jesus when He comes to Lazarus' tomb and He Himself weeps because He knows what loss feels like. Jesus knows He's going to bring you back to life. Jesus knows, but He experiences the brokenness of loss and He's moved by that. David even says in one of the Psalms that God has even saved His tears in a bottle. When you are most broken, you are blessed because God is near you. Matthew 5:5, the ideal of meekness. You're blessed when you're content with just who you are, no more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that can't be bought. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. You can't buy the earth. But when you are satisfied in who you are, fully, contently, I believe in God's eyes, you got more than you can imagine. Jesus said on one occasion, what shall a man give in exchange for a soul? He had the whole earth. Would He give it in exchange for a soul? When you recognize who you are in God's eyes, or living fully in that you are a child of God, of the King Most High, that God loves you, God cherishes you, and God will take you just as you are, you're blessed. You own something that's worth more than all the world. For those who hunger and thirst, you're blessed when you've worked up a good appetite for God. He's food and drink and the best meal you'll ever eat. When you hunger for God, when you desire to do what God wants in your life, when that's the most important, number one decision-making thing, what does God want me to do? What is God's will in this? How can I glorify God in doing this? Or which decision brings God the most glory? He's the food and the drink and the best meal you've ever had. You will be filled. Matthew 5:7, the merciful. You're blessed when you care. When you care enough to show mercy, when you care enough to show grace to other people, you are blessed. At that moment of being full of care, you find yourselves cared for. When you show mercy to your fellow man, when you go the second mile that he's going to talk about, when you begin to do things like that, guess what? You begin to realize how truly blessed you are. When we understand the power of mercy. Pure-hearted folks. You're blessed when you get your inside world, that is your mind and your heart, put right. Then you can see God in the outside world. I spent a long time in my Christian life thinking this passage meant something else. I spent a long time thinking about if I'm really, really pure, I get to see God. Like a future event. If I'm really, really, really good, I really, really make my heart pure, then I get to see God. Now, I don't think that's what the passage is saying. I think when Jesus says pure-hearted people see God everywhere. Pure-hearted people saw God this morning in the sunrise. Pure-hearted people see God in children playing happily together. Pure-hearted people see God everywhere. They see Him now, not some future promise, and they are blessed people. If you wake up tomorrow and you see God at work in your life, aren't you blessed? You see two people being nice to each other. Oh, isn't that nice? Yeah, isn't God great? You see God everywhere. And all the blessings of your life. And Jesus is encouraging them as pure-hearted people, you can see God everywhere. Peacemakers. You're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are in your place in God's family. When you understand that some people are gifted with peacemaking, and you may be that person, and you fully live that out in your life, guess what? You're doing what God's called you to do. And you're a blessed person who just sometimes have the fortitude just to say, why can't we all just get along? That there's a greater call here to be the peacemaker. Matthew 5:10, the persecuted. You're blessed when your commitment to God provokes persecution. The persecution drives you even deeper into God's kingdom. It's been a commentary on the contemporary church. What we need more today is persecution. Sometimes we don't like the way the culture is going, and some of us are fighting back against the way, but we don't like the way things are going. Guess what? We need it, a wake-up call. When there's nothing to complain about, very often we get very complacent. But when you're persecuted simply for doing what's right, and Jesus goes on with this beatitude, not only count yourselves blessed every time people put you down or throw you out or speak lies about you to discredit me. What it means is that the truth is too close for comfort. And they are uncomfortable. You can be glad when that happens. Give a cheer, even though they don't like it. I do. And all of heaven applauds. And know that you are in good company. My prophets and witnesses have always gotten into this kind of trouble. We are so blessed with so many fine young people here at church. I mean, we are blessed. Blessed. NYG, Netherland Youth Group, I mean, we're so blessed. And they do some of the best work for the kingdom of Christ because they're very open in their faith. And they distinguish themselves amongst their peers in school sometimes because they behave better. Their language is better. Their conduct is better. They're more respectful. And other kids don't like it. You might get made fun of. You might get put down. Maybe ostracized a bit, but Jesus is speaking directly to you because guess what? When you discredit somebody for being good for me, guess what? Heaven applauds. Good job. Good job. Keep it up. Or maybe it's you at work. Maybe when people at work come in tomorrow and talk about the wild weekend they had, how much fun they had when they got wasted. And they said, what'd you do? I said, I went to church Sunday. That's what I do. Well, you're just holier than thou, aren't you? No, I just went to church Sunday. And people begin to persecute you because you're different than them. And heaven says, good job. Keep it up. You're blessed. The Beatitudes are not a bunch of rules. Beatitudes are not a bunch of commands. The Beatitudes are a bunch of promises is what they are. When you find yourself broken, when you find yourself seeking mercy, when you find yourself being a peacemaker, when you want more from God than you've ever wanted in your life, when you find yourself being persecuted, when you find yourself in these situations, you are blessed. The Anawim, he knew that was what he's saying to them. In the book that we've been reading, Randy Harris talks about being in college, and there was an intramural softball team in college. And to have a team, you had to have 12 players, even though only 10 took the field. You had to have 12 players to make a team. And so they were really down to it. The team needed one more player. He would have made player number 12. Okay? And they pretty much says, okay, we just need you to sign up for the team. Okay, so he signed up for the team. And I can really relate to him. Randy says he never was an athlete, and I can really relate to him. And he said he realized how much an animal he was when one day 2 of the other guys didn't show up, but 9 took the field and they left him on the bench. He sat in the dugout while his teammates played, one man short. That he was more worthless to them, could do less damage sitting on the bench than playing on the field. Now, I said I could relate to that. Okay? I know it's hard for some of you to imagine, but I'm not an athlete. Oh, that's hard snickering. I have never been an athlete. I got paddled in 6th grade for doing poorly at kickball. Now that's pretty bad when your teacher takes a paddle to recess and paddles you for doing poorly at kickball. Okay. I made straight C's in PE because the teacher wouldn't give any grade less than a C. Okay. So, in Coach Fincher's PE class, I made straight C's. I think one time I did approximate a C+. Okay. But straight C's. Okay. Because he didn't give me anything less than a C. So I can really relate to always being picked last or not being picked at all. But have you ever had the experience where you were made a winner, even though you're an Anawim? I did. 17 years ago, some of you showed me grace and mercy. And you asked me to be on the Netherland Church of Christ co-ed softball team, Division A in Overton County, Tennessee. And I'm thinking, surely not me. Okay. Yeah. Some of you, how were on the 2000 team? How were you on that team? Several? Yeah. Raise your hand. Yes. Yeah, yeah. 2000. And they would be kind enough not to say it, but I was absolutely the worst player on the team. Okay. They would sometimes put me in right field, sometimes. Okay. I did have a few at-bats, I remember Tom trying to coach me a little bit. Try to swing before, about the time the ball gets the plate not before or after. So I remember. But something amazing happened. Okay? Something really amazing happened. That by being chosen to be on that team and being shown a lot of grace and mercy, this is one of my prized possessions. Our elders were so impressed by that at that time that they had us team jackets made. And mine says, Netherland Church of Christ, Overton County, co-ed, Church League, Division A, champs, 2000. I bet some of you don't have yours anymore. Mine's still kept in the closet. I was an Anawim. I had nothing to offer but my presence. And they will say, amen. But I was made a winner. That's the Beatitudes. That's Jesus saying, you all ain't got nothing. But by having nothing, guess what? You're blessed. I declare you winners. I declare you champions. That's the message of the Beatitudes. It's not strive to be these things. It says when you are these things, you are a blessed person. And that list is so long and inclusive. Guess what? You heard yourself somewhere this morning on that list. You had to. And I'll tell you, you are blessed. You are blessed. One of the disciples that was sitting there when Jesus said this was John. In his gospel, he said this, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld His glory, the glory as the only begotten of Father, full of grace and truth." He said, when we saw Jesus, we saw grace and truth personified. And understand this, that when Jesus begins the Sermon on the Mount, He starts with grace and ends with truth. Now, it's going to be challenging, some of the stuff we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks. I encourage you, if you will, commit yourself to reading the Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5 through 7. I know you have other Bible readings you're doing, but just read it as many times as you can a week, because you'll help get yourself more out of the lessons and commit yourself. But the sermon starts with grace and ends with truth. Remember, John started with the end in mind. If you do these things, you're like the wise man who builds his house upon the rock. It starts with grace and ends with truth. I guess this morning, I'm going to ask you, have you been blessed by His grace? Now, I got a jacket, and it's a cool jacket. I appreciate my jacket. I took good care of it over the years. But it's not what God offers you. He offers you so much more. If you confess His Son as your Savior, buried with Him in baptism, He puts a new garment on you, clothes you with Christ, and you are blessed. You've experienced His grace and His truth. Brother Adam has a good song picked out for us. If we can assist you in any way this morning, won't you come as we sing that song?